Good evening, everyone. My name is Arash Angaji. I'm the Chief Executive of Orthopaedic Research UK. And I'm delighted to welcome you all to the final session of our National Research Webinar Series organized by BOMSA, BOTA, and Orthopaedic Research UK. Slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with Orthopaedic Research UK, we are a medical research charity based in London. We've been going since 1989. The charity was founded by an orthopedic surgeon called Ronald Furlong. And the core purpose of the charity is to use our funding to drive breakthrough research and education programs and innovation in bone, joint, and muscle well-being. And really, our aim is to reduce the burden on individuals, on workplaces, and on the NHS. And we see our role as an organization that constantly invests in the future movement of the society. And when we look at the MSK, it's a massive problem for the NHS. It's costly, it's a growing problem, and especially fueled by aging population and physical inactivity and obesity. 1 in 5 GP visits due to a MSK condition. It's really costing the NHS approximately £5 billion each year. And when we look at the prevalence of MSK conditions, which is on the rise, different nations, about a third of the population are impacted. The impact on economy productivity is huge. Nearly 31 million days lost due to MSK conditions, and the estimated impact on economy is £7 billion each year. And I'm sure you're too familiar with this graph. Waiting lists for hospital treatment rose to a record of 7.2 million in January this year, and the 18-week treatment target has not been met since 2016. So really, in this environment where resources are stretched, the system is under pressure, our research goal is to support future MSK leaders. You guys, hopefully, when equipped with the correct knowledge and embark on your clinical pathways, you're able to improve clinical practice and accelerate innovation. I encourage you to visit our website and read about the people that we have funded over the years, the projects that they have undertaken, and to hopefully, I'm sure it will inspire you. In fact, tonight we have an ex-ORUK researcher with us, Prof. Andy Metcalfe, was a registrar back in 2011 with a huge passion for research on the knee joint, and I believe that passion still exists. And he did his research at Cardiff University and embarked on a very successful clinical academic pathway and became a professor currently at the University of Warwick. We do have our differences, him being a Man United fan, but once we're off the pitch, we really get on well with each other. I would like to sincerely thank our course conveners, Shiv, Nadir, Iggy, and Arham, who've been working with us to develop this great initiative with BOMSA and BOTA. And more importantly, we are grateful to all the speakers who very generously gave up their time to share their experiences and knowledge. Last but not least, I'm sure most of you are aware, tomorrow, BOTA and ORUK Sustainability in Orthopedic Surgery, which is a completely free and online conference. It would be lovely if you're able to join us. Without further ado, it's a pleasure to introduce Mr. Chetan Khatri from University of Warwick, who is going to tell us all about his experiences as to how to go on about planning a career as a clinical academic. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the introduction. Grand, lovely. Can everyone see my slides okay? Someone gives me a thumbs up.
We can,
Yeah.
yes.
Lovely, cool. So, hi everyone, my name's Chetan. I'm a Orthopaedic Registrar and I'm in the final year of my PhD. And I'm going to go through the academic clinical pathway, examples at each stage of how to get involved. And then at the end, I'll have just a wee discussion as to what I think are the pros, and there are definitely negatives of being a clinical academic. You kind of start at the, when I started, it was like, oh, to infinity and beyond. Or like, where can I go with this? I could do anything I want to, and you know, I was in a very fortunate position at both at undergraduate level and immediately after graduation to be surrounded by people who were doing great things, and that's what inspired me. And I think at this point, it might be a good time to reflect on what is most important to you in your career, and really figuring out the motivations of why you want to do something, whether that be clinical academia, be it pure clinician, or do management, or do teaching. What are the things that motivate you in what you want to achieve? You know, is that you want to be a great surgeon, you want to be great at your job, and you want to be able to do 1,000 knee replacements a year, a really high volume, really perfect a technique? Or do you want to have a profile? Do you want people to have heard of you? Do you want your name to be spread far? Or is it your image, what people perceive you're like? And I think figuring out what motivates you and what you're aiming for, those motivations may help you decide what kind of career path you want to go down. This is something that was told to me really early on, and I found it very useful. This is a slide that I hope some of you are familiar with. It's the NIHR integrated academic clinical pathway. It kind of starts across a med school where you can do an integrated BSc, or some medical schools offer special study modules, and some people even do higher research degrees such as an MD or a PhD at that point. The traditional pathways that most people, I would say the vast majority of people, will do integrated BSc and then go on to the foundation program. Within the foundation program, what used to be called the academic foundation program, now the specialist foundation program, you typically have a 4-month academic block. Following that, you're appointed to the academic clinical fellow role, and that's your kind of CT1 or ST1 level. They're usually quite valuable in that they normally come with a national training number. So in the context of orthopedics, I think that's really golden. And it's golden for a few reasons, and I'll come on to the NIHR ACF later on. That's usually the time when people start to think about a PhD, and postdoctorally in the latter years of your clinical training, you consider doing things like clinical lecturer or clinician scientist as well. Following CCT, you then aim to have a kind of a mixture of an academic and clinical post as a consultant. My experience so far has been until the PhD. And I went out a PhD at ST3, so I'll take you through that sort of journey, and then Andy, who has much longer period of it, much further down his career, can give you a bit more details about the rest of it as well. So I guess the first thing is, what is the worth of a medical student? I know there'll be some medical students here thinking, what am I able to do? And there are plenty of medical student projects that have made a real meaningful difference in patient care. I think StarSurge, the student collaborative, is excellent. It's a good way of getting involved, right from grassroots level of data collection. Then they have local leads which organize their regional, their medical school, and then onto the steering committee, which actually start to design, run, and deliver the projects. They have a great pathway set up now. It's a very professional setup, and they're very easy contactable. There's a website or there's a Twitter. And you can see that since 2013, almost on a yearly basis, they've produced a high quality project, usually published in the British Journal of Surgery. I won't go on too much about the benefits of collaborative surgery because I think you've already, or collaborative research, because I think you've already had a talk on that. But I think collaborative like StarSurge is a great way to get involved as a medical student to get something meaningful done. The great thing about StarSurge, like I was saying, is that there is a really good established pathway now, and where those people in red start off as data collection, they then go on to be a local lead, usually for a year or 2 years, and then the dark blue represents Post-graduating, when you program, I won't touch on the last two because this is a talk about a career in clinical academia. So we'll focus on the end up having roadblocks. If a lot of places do, however, have projects, like a wider project that is like a clinical trial that's running and is funded and has money to do study within those trials, and therefore they may come with some funding. But if you want to do something like lab-based research, then you may not be able to do that without getting your own funding. The great thing is that you get 4 months allocated in 2 years, so essentially one of your 6 placements, usually in your FY2 year, will be an academic post. Some specialist programs have day release, although I think those are diminishing, and it's associated with an honorary contract. Now, what should your aims be during this time? I'll be honest, in achieving something groundbreaking is pretty unlikely. But what I do think it is a great opportunity to enhance your CV, and that is for your further applications for CST or academic clinical fellowship, or eventually to be a registrar. The rest of your colleagues, to get your CST points and to get your ACF points, will have to be doing audits, will have to be doing research, will have to be doing presentations. And actually having 4 months time to do that, set a job where you don't have night shifts, you don't have weekends, is really a great opportunity to get those things done. They may sound simple, but it does lay the foundations for what's come in the kind of future. It's also times where you can think about doing some higher degrees. So I know plenty of people who did a PG cert during that time in medical education. Usually it's over a year, and during that 4 months is when they complete most of their modules. Or you can also start to develop skills where you kind of do need a bit of time to just sit down and work through things. A great example of that is learning how to do stats, learning a statistical program, learning how the program works, and learning how to do basic things, applying that. Some people are now using that time to learn things like machine learning or using Java to learn how to code. And the opportunity to have a block of time where you don't really have a day job you can explore means that your opportunities to enhance your CV are actually really good. We then move on to the academic clinical fellowship. This is usually 25% academic, but there's a variation in programs. So the Warwick program, which is where I'm based, gives you 9 months over the course of 3 years. However, other programs give you a bit longer, but also extend your clinical training. For example, I know that some of you, I know this is primarily in orthopedics, but some of you may see the dark side and go to general surgery. In general, some of the general surgical posts come with a year of academic time split across your ST2 year, but it means that your SHO years are elongated to 3 years. So your clinical time is the same, and that kind of extra year of your clinical training should be taken into consideration. Now here, what should your aims be in the ACF program? Most ACFs come with funding to complete a master's, and as they're usually affiliated with a university, you can usually secure a master's within the course of your ACF. But I think the main function is and the thing that NIHR really are trying to get you to achieve is to spend that time to either secure funding, whether that be through a doctoral research fellowship or through other charities like ORUK or MRC, or some subspecialist societies like BASC also give fellowships for a higher research degree, like an MD or a PhD. And then, of course, I think this is the time where, because you're in a department for a long period of time with a sustained amount of academic time, you get the opportunity to start building projects by yourselves and going to publication. Then you get on to PhD, and PhD is a bit of an odd time. When you first start off, you think, what is my timetable? There's not really much to do at the start, and you kind of wonder and scratch your head, and you have a bit of time to relax initially. And I kind of started my PhD after a really busy 6-month kind of trauma block, so I was tired, I was a little bit jaded from clinical practice, and so my timetable ended up looking like something like this, which is what a lot of academic blocks start off with. The issue is though with PhD, you end up as you start to dig into your topic, as you start to dig into your thesis, things get busier and busier. Your supervisors usually have a habit of generating new ideas and new avenues for you to explore, which is great, and it keeps you busy towards that towards the end of the, or even towards the middle of the PhD. PhD is also a great time for having a break from clinical training. So like I said, I went pretty much straight through working non-stop from graduation to middle of ST3. And after the first 6 months of ST3, actually having some time out to take a pause from that was quite good. It was a good time in my life outside of professionally, in terms of my family life, and I could do things that I wouldn't have been able to do during the PhD, during clinical training. I wanted to discuss some advantages of the kind of academic clinical pathway and also some negative bits. I guess the main advantage is you get the opportunity to research something that you're passionate in. You try to align yourself into a department or with people that have the same value sets as you are, as you do, and that's what kind of makes me consider back to the first slide of what motivates you to do things. So for people who want to do clinical trials, you go to work in a unit which is associated with a clinical trials unit. Or if you want to do more basic science research, places like Cambridge offer that much better than other places do. And likewise, if you want to do something that's to do with innovation, to do with technology, Imperial College may also be a great opportunity to align yourself to that. What I particularly like about it is that you get to engage a slightly different part of your brain than you get to do in clinical practice. In clinical practice, when you're either on call, you're doing a theatre case, you get to focus about 15 minutes up to 2 hours, or however long it is, on one patient, one problem. You put everything together, you come up with your diagnosis, come up with your management plan, or you do your procedure, and at the end of it, you're done, and you can kind of close the book on that, you can move forward, you can move to the next thing. But research isn't quite like that. You have often a sustained period of concentration, of thought on the same idea, on the same project, how to tackle something in a very different way to what you do in a clinical basis. And I found, particularly in the time when I was in my ST1 and ST2 years, where I was in clinical practice, but also working at my PhD idea, that during that time, it's actually quite nice to be able to switch between the two and to think differently about problems. It also allows you to develop an area of expertise. Now, I think I do have a massive amount of imposter syndrome in thinking, I don't really know anything about anything. And my PhD has certainly taught me that my knowledge is very, very limited and kind of teaches you the gulf of things that you don't know. But you do very quickly develop an area of expertise. You do become better than the most of the population at the topic that you're studying. And if you went to go do a systematic review of the management of Achilles tendon tear, you will become an expert in that area, and your knowledge will surpass other people in that. The other massive advantage is conferences. Initially, as a medical student, I went to conferences to get as many points as I could. So I submitted as many abstracts to conferences that were easy to get to, that cost a low amount of money. But as I started to develop more into postgraduate, I started choosing conferences that were good conferences, but also in great locations. South Africa is probably one of the highlights of conferences I've been on. And whilst it wasn't all play, there was quite a lot of work associated with it. I'd saved up a bunch of projects. I think I saved up about 7 abstracts to submit, and those were all accepted as oral presentations. So it did end up being quite a fruitful trip in many ways. Of course, it was fruitful in more than just work. I had 3 days conferences, which lunches were spent at the waterfront of Cape Town, and evenings spent up climbing up Table Mountain and Lion's Head. And then afterwards, we had 4 days of a holiday where we went shark diving. And the conference is colloquially known in our little group as the Shark Diving Conference. The negatives, however, are something to consider, because I think these are things that really wear people down. And they wear people down, and they cause people to be put off academia. The first thing I want to talk to you about is this kind of Dunning-Kruger effect, because there's highs and lows of research. When you first start something, you know absolutely nothing, and you can't do anything. And that's fine, that's where we all start from. And then all of a sudden you read into a topic, you get excited about the topic. And if you're finding yourself getting excited about topics, I think that's a positive thing. to consider a career in research. Then you get to what's called the peak of Mount Stupid, where you suddenly think you know everything, but actually you don't. And very quickly you find out that your confidence drops dramatically as your knowledge increases, and then you're in that valley of despair. And I've been in the valley of despair at multiple stages in my career, whether that be in my as a medical student, as an academic foundation doctor, and then even now in my PhD. And this is a cyclical thing. So I kind of had this valley of despair not too long ago. You then go onto the slope of enlightenment and then the plateau of sustainability. And that's as you slowly build your confidence. You understand the research area a lot better than you did before. And knowing that there's fluctuations in your day-to-day life when you're at the peak of Mount Stupid and you're really happy, and then you go very quickly to the valley of despair, as long as you're aware that this is going to happen, and that things do get better if you persist at it, that's a positive thing. I think the people who don't realize that it fluctuates like this, when they hit the valley of despair, that's usually when people quit or they move on to something else. The other negatives I really wanted to consider was that you never get to switch off. When you're in your clinical practice, so particularly in your foundation years and your early SHO years, you've got a lot of things going on. You've got your exams to pass, you've got courses to do, you've got your logbook to increase, you've got all those TTOs to do on the ward. But at the same time, you still have to keep pushing your academic projects through. And therefore, you do end up thinking about working weekends, working in the evenings, and that never switch off. That constant thinking can wear you down. It can burn you out in many ways. The work-life balance in that also comes to be quite tricky. I found that when I was in F1 and F2, when I kind of had a girlfriend, I lived by myself, I had a lot more time. I'd be much more willing to spend evenings doing things, much more willing to spend weekends doing some work. But now, as I kind of more mature, and people at my stage are now starting to have families, starting having children, that kind of pushing work into the evenings is very difficult. Pushing works into the weekend is very difficult. And you have to be aware that either you're prepared to sacrifice one aspect of your life for another, or you need to be very disciplined and work during the working day. And I'm in the third year of my PhD, and I'm still kind of struggling with that, where I'm still struggling to work between 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or whatever, and work ends up happening in the weekends because of one thing or the other, getting distracted during the day. It would be a lie to say that the concept of publish or perish doesn't exist. I think when it gets to the more senior you get, the pressures do get a little bit higher, and there is a slight pressure to produce something. Now, whether that be a conference public abstract or whether that be full papers, is different. But I think there is definitely a pressure to do that and to complete that, and to be a finisher. And pushing it over the line in the last bit is actually probably the most difficult bit. The last thing I want to say is that you still have to meet your clinical competencies. It's quite difficult to manage to do all these things, and also get your foundation competencies okay. And then finally, you have to find what your purpose is, what you need to do, what you like doing, what you have to do, and kind of what the world needs to do. I'm happy for any of you to get in touch with me if you want to discuss any ideas or anything. I'm sure between us, we can find someone near you that can help you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your lecture. Andy, could you please share screen? Thank you.
Go. Right, can you hear me and can you see the slides?
We can, yes, thank you.
Fantastic. So yeah, thank you for that, Chetan. Fantastic talk, and thank you, Arash, for the introduction. I too have had to tolerate Arsenal related abuse for many years, but I've had fantastic support from ORUK, and it's all in good spirits. So yeah, great part of the journey. And I guess I'm going to talk a bit more about my journey, and perhaps focusing on the later part of my journey, because Chetan has sort of covered his experience from that earlier part of the journey. And and what life's like as a clinical academic surgeon, a bit more just my perspective on ways of getting there. So, right, is this talk going to work? Here we go. And I'm going to start with, I mean, I think what the point Chetan raised about this, why are we doing it? Well, yeah, I mean, I think that is really important to say. I always start with, why do we do surgery? And we used to have a consultant colleague in our department who said, well, it's good for patients. Reflected the fact that we enjoy doing surgery. It's why we are driven to do surgery. And that's great. And that is also true of research. It's good for patients and it's fun. You get to meet lots of people, you get to do lots of things. And combining the two can be fun. And I think that's important to realize. You've got to enjoy the journey, but equally you've got to understand what clinical academia is like and means. Research really is good for patients. I think sometimes we can sort of get lost in the wood for the trees and see that, each little bit of research, how much of a difference has that individual paper made or that individual paper made, and maybe not stand back and see the huge benefit we get for research as a community. This is a chart of what happens to different trusts that do different amounts of research. And the trusts with the highest funded research in the UK have the best outcomes for their patients in terms of, this is standardized mortality ratios for patients. So yeah, it's a slightly different field from orthopedics, but it's been repeated over lots of different specialties, that if your trust does more research, then your patients will be better. And that's true for research in general. It's true for clinical trials particularly. And I think if you do research, you attract, as a trust, you attract better staff. As an individual, you are much more focused on your topic. And as a patient, you get better direct care. So research is good for patients, even at the time when it's being done, never mind the findings afterwards. One of the things when me and Chetan were talking about how we do this is talking about what my life's like as a clinical academic surgeon. And I think this using both different parts of your brain thing is a really apt description. I spend half my life as a consultant knee surgeon. So I do ACL reconstructions and I do knee replacements and patellofemoral instability work and that sort of thing. And that's great. And my work packages last maybe 2 hours. I'm super focused for like a couple of hours, and then you're on to the next patient and you're constantly moving on, and your clinics are very fast paced. And then on the other half of my work, I'm thinking about projects that might last for 5 years or 10 years, or, on things that are really take a very different style of thinking. So if a clinic appointment takes me 15 minutes in the NHS, a meeting might take me an hour and a half in the university side. And I love that change of gear. I find that fascinating, but it's very much horses for courses. Some people don't like that change. They don't like having to move so much. Some people love the sort of adventure of always doing something new. And if that's something that attracts you, then clinical academia is really, really good fun. The great attractions of clinical academia was something that was sort of raised to me by James Richardson. This is a professor of surgery in Oswestry who sadly passed away a few years ago, but he was a real inspiration and someone who I knew well. And he used to say, I've only got 2 hands. The problem I have is I've only got 2 hands. He says, I can do as many operations as I can, but I can only ever treat so many people in my lifetime. But if I do really good quality research, I can touch thousands, if not millions of people. And I think that's very true. I think you could get to a point where suddenly you see an impact that is beyond what you could ever achieve through your own clinical skill. And I think having both allows you to achieve the 2 things together, which is fabulous. Increasingly, we also have access to a fabulous research lab, and you can quite easily look at the UK sort of science and say, well, how can we ever compete with America or China? But actually what we have, never mind the fantastic basic science facilities actually that do exist across many universities, is an absolutely incredible network of recruitment sites. And I've highlighted NIHR, but you can do basic science at multi-site level as well. And that allows you access to a population that's way bigger than any other network in the world. And so the UK is able to deliver, the best research that's networked and across large populations in a way that many other places can't. And so accessing that is really worthwhile. What sort of work do we do, and what sort of work do I research? Well, we've done all sorts of fascinating stuff. I'm a knee surgeon, and my research has increasingly become knee surgery focused. So we've been doing research on robotics in joint replacement. I lead the knee side, and my colleague who's designed here on the BBC, Pete Wall, runs Racer Hip. We're doing studies into meniscal allografts, which is transplant meniscus in the knee. And the lit up photo that's sort of in the middle at the bottom here is a surgical colleague of mine called Nick Smith, who's demonstrating to people how he does this surgery to a group of surgeons who are training for a national randomized controlled trial. And I work with our research team. This is at the same meeting of some of our team for that study, learning to deliver that. And then we also have a big project going on about patellar instability. And these are the sort of things that you really feel will have future impact, which is exciting. Equally, the more senior you get, and as I was asked to reflect on life as a professor and what does that look like, you start leading groups. And I'm involved in helping to lead this surgery, pain and rehabilitation group at Warwick CTU. And that's a huge group. There's about £15 million worth of research in that group. Team of about 40 delivering it. This is our sort of away day, and delivering all sorts of stuff from pulmonary rehabilitation to management of opioids for chronic pain, across orthopedic topics as well. And so it's fascinating to be able to do that. But one of the things I probably enjoy most is actually the training and mentoring for future research leaders. I'm very involved in our orthopedic program. This photo is slightly out of date, but is some of our previous trainees. We have trainees off doing PhDs in all parts of the world. This is Alex, who's just finished in Malawi. And I get to do that because we get involved in this integrated academic training pathway. Although I have to say, one of the things about getting there is, and we can look at these slides and often think there's just one pathway, and actually there's really lots of ways of doing it. And I think people can worry because they find it hard to get on the programs, or their jobs are very competitive, or it doesn't work for me. Well, look, success looks like things that are all over the place. And my background was very basic science. My career was very much to the right. I got very well supported, as you heard, with Orthopaedic Research UK, but many other sources of support. And I think most of us actually make the journey on the right rather than the journey on the left. Nonetheless, the NIHR program that we've heard about, where you've got this sort of pathway through academic foundation programs, academic clinical fellowships, then onto clinical lectureships, and eventually onto senior posts, is certainly one way of doing it. And it's a good way of doing it because it buys time for you to do the hard work. So it's certainly a route worth investing in, but it's definitely not the only one. Chetan's talked you through this a bit already. Academic foundation program is a great way to start. It can be competitive to get into, gives you some research blocks across multiple specialties to build some experience. Very, very competitive to get onto the academic clinical fellowships, but a fantastic post for those who are interested in research. Commits time for 3 years towards developing a PhD. And many of our trainees have gone out to do PhDs over that time. So huge helpful for those really engaged in an academic career. Clinical lectureships in orthopedics tend to be towards the end of training after PhDs for developing those people towards high-flying research careers, and often tailored towards individual development needs. So there's less what you might call a consistent structure for that. It's much more tailored. And the reality is the pathway works. There are and all of these people have been through the Warwick program. So Xavier Griffin is professor in London, and Dan Perry professor in Liverpool and Oxford. Pete Wall has been an associate professor with us. He's now leading the robotic hip national randomized trial, and Michelle Joseph, who is delivering global health research out of Harvard. So you can really highly achieve through this program, but as I say, it's far from the only route. So yes, you don't have to do it that way. Many of us, myself included, found a different path into academia, and the picture on the top right was in fact from the sort of ORUK, related to the ORUK project. I was much more basic science. If you want to be a senior clinical academic, a PhD becomes the entry criteria, and there's no doubt that papers still matter. So these sort of things have to be done, but it's a question about getting people into the process for doing it, and there are many ways into that route. Top tips for people wanting to apply for it, I would say build your research experience, visit units, show an interest in what they're doing, get to know what you enjoy. Probably lots of people ask me about different things they should be doing and different activities that will help. And I always say, well, look, ultimately the top two things are getting papers and get your exams out the way. They're the biggest, hardest things, and they'll always look the best because they're the biggest, toughest things to do, and they're worth investing time in. People worry about writing smart applications that are beautifully worded and are very clever, but actually you don't have to write, you don't have to be posh in the way you write, you don't have to write clever sentences. The best academics I've ever worked with have actually been written in a very blunt, very straightforward way. And in terms of your applications, that's true too. But I would say, if you're going to do applications for these competitive posts, get a really good proofreader, because, you know, silly mistakes, silly grammar errors, you just don't see unless someone proofreads it and says, look, actually that reads sensibly. And you can see the things that have been proofread, but you certainly don't have to be clever. It's been I've given you a big whiz through the journey this session, but I think one of my other most important tips is, you know, enjoy the journey. Clinical academia is a lot of fun. You're always doing something different and something new. There's always stuff to learn, and there's always something new and exciting. So enjoy it. It's quite easy to get wrapped up in the future and forget to enjoy what's present. So in summary, surgery is loads of fun. These are all things that we do as part of surgery. You know, exciting operations, getting to engage with new technology, getting to engage with new techniques and procedures. We enjoy doing surgery. We enjoy doing research. This is a nice committee where basically I got to spend a day a month for something like 18 months with a whole group of people that I really liked, really got to know, and you really do build this sort of community that's different to your life in clinical practice, but it's fascinating. And you can do both, and you can enjoy it, and that see about clinical academia and where it can be, but undoubtedly a busy life as well. So, well, I hope that's helped. That's my talk. And I think we were going to, do I undo this share?
Yes, you just
stop share, there we go. Yeah, sorry. So I think we were going to take questions in a couple of minutes, but I did think we would spend just a minute or so, Chetan and myself work together, and just taking a minute or so, just sort of interviewing about the questions before to see if that helps you. And I wanted to ask Chetan about this sort of thing about, you know, an easy journey, a straightforward journey and just following the pattern, or you know, managing life as you go along and going along with this sort of path of success that can be quite variable. Did you sort of plan it all out, Chetan, or do you think it just sort of, you know, it's a thing that you move into, it's a new adventure each time? How do you see it?
Yeah, I certainly see it as a new adventure each time. Whilst on paper, I guess I follow that route, that the integrated academic pathway route. It wasn't all smooth sailing. In my F2 year, I didn't get a job that I wanted. I took an F3 year. I took a year out to do some more things, and then was appointed to an ACF. And I think really at each stage, what motivated me to do whatever the next step was because it was something that I was interested in. And I think that has really paid dividends. So like I was interested in, during my F3 year, just kind of having a break, and while I was getting some surgical experience, I wanted to do it somewhere different. And I enjoyed that. And then that also gave me perspective of what I wanted to do moving forward. Yeah, my journey hasn't, or on paper may appear to be straightforward, but hasn't been. And I've moved some specialty. I think in F2, I kept telling Andy I wanted to do general surgery. Thankfully, I've moved on from those dark days.
Good.
And then I think the other question that we had, was from me to you, was when you're at the opposite end of the table, when you're assessing trainees and you're assessing applications, what are the sort of things you look for in a person when making a decision whether they should be appointed, or what makes people stand out?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I suppose I go back to what you want. I suppose what you want a finish is someone who's going to be able to start, but also be a finisher completer. I think there's, we imagine clinical academics as people who want to, put lots of deep thought into things and come up with lots of exciting things. And there's some truth in that. But in truth, the big skill in academia is getting on and doing it and getting work done. And so I think this thing of, being a finisher completer and demonstrating it with probably papers is a big thing. Outputs is a big thing. Showing engagement with work in a practical way is a big thing. So I would sort of advise people to, get on and do things. Worry less about having to be perfect, and get on and do a project. Get on and take stuff on, because actually you can do some fun stuff, and if you like it, you'll want to do more, and that will help. So my advice is deliver projects, deliver work because it's good, and the more you see that, the more convinced you are that someone's gonna be that sort of finisher completer, which I think is really the big skill in academia, actually.
Yeah. I think that probably brings us to time for opening up to the rest of the audience for questions.
Yeah. So we've got one from Prince. Would an applicant with more papers published of lower quality or fewer papers with high quality get picked?
Ooh. No, there's an interesting question. My advice would probably be to go for the better quality. My advice would be to generally go for better quality. It's a subjective judgment and each unit's different, but I think generally it's more satisfying to do work that's higher quality if you can. It's more enjoyable, you invest more in it, and you get to the end and see a bigger change and a bigger impact. So I think if you've got the opportunity to judge between those, that's great. I would say my experience of most people's career journey is they start on the small stuff, and so someone, a registrar or a consultant or someone at your local trust says, can you do this small project for me? Which may not even be publishable. It might just be a really small thing, might even be an audit or a small local presentation. And if you come back to them after a period and say, look, here we go, it's done, it's completed, or you meet them and do it and then deliver it, they say, okay, great. Actually, I've got this other really interesting thing. And then you get that next big thing. And I would say, if I look through the people that I know who've been the trainees who've been really successful, a lot of them have started on the small stuff, delivered on that. So someone's gone, right, why don't you do that? And then they've delivered on that. And then you go, right, why don't you do this? This is the big exciting thing. And it's it's that project further down the lines stuff. Because people will invest in you if you invest in them.
And just to add to that, I think there is also an element of you have to play the game. So the NIHR gives you the shortlisting criteria for an ACF. So you get to be shortlisted. I think the maximum points you can get is 10 for publication. So there is an element of you have to you have to know what the points are and get maximum points to get yourself shortlisted in the first place. And like it's a balance, it's tricky.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very competitive. But actually, what I have to say is, as I see applications, I'm really impressed by how much people are investing in research now at, earlier and earlier phases in their career. And I think what Chetan said about these, the big trainee collaboratives, and those are great opportunities to get engaged and involved in real quality research.
The next question is quite linked to that. So it's, when do opportunities open up for medical students to do research? As a soon-to-be second year with no prior research experience, despite looking for it, where do I go out from here, and what can I look out for?
Chetan, you're probably better qualified on that, because you've been.
So I think when you're in your second year, if you're on a 5-year degree, that usually means you haven't started much clinical placements. And I do think when you start your clinical placements and you start interacting with doctors on a day-to-day basis in a kind of sustained placement rather than like a day or something, is when you really get opportunities to start doing research. I think one of the first things you can really start to do is an audit, because it teaches you some really basic research principles and how to register an audit, how to collect data, the practicalities of doing that. And then into your second and third year, again, I'd really point you to Star Search. As a student collaborative, it was designed to get people into research at really early stages. If you see the people who've been really successful within Search are people who started off in the second year, and they started off with data collection, and they moved on to organising the collaborative at a local level before stepping up to a national stage or an international stage with a European medical student collaborative. They also outpoint opportunities to other research projects. So if you sign up to their mailing list, they often send out newsletters saying these are opportunities in your region.
Any other questions? Sorry.
Any other questions?
Oh, I think Asmi has posted a question.
I don't think you do. If anyone's got a...
So on the chat, it says, do you have any suggestions for next steps for those who have done MB PhDs? Do AFP programs view this as experience favorably? And otherwise, do you see there being adequate time for research as a non-academic foundation trainee?
Well, I'll maybe give my view, and Chetan, you give your view on that, because that, I think, is we could both bring different perspectives to. So look, if you've done a PhD, that's brilliant. I mean, that's a great qualification from the start. You would look to develop your CV differently later on. So at the stage when other people are doing PhDs, you might start to do some effectively postdoc work, grant applications, postdoc work. I can think of certainly a handful of orthopaedic trainees who've come in with PhDs from other fields prior to doing medicine, for example, who've actually gone onto ACFs, used their time productively, but to gain grants for time out for projects they've run, which have ultimately been very successful. One of our future consultant colleagues managed to get a paper from that sort of process into New England Journal of Medicine last year. So you really can do some quite remarkable things. And so it's just, you're ahead of the game in that sense. And it's certainly not a thing that puts people off, but you just structure it a little bit differently. And I guess it's thinking about what route you want to go down and who you need to work with to help you support that. And can you do, if you're not on an academic AFY project, but can you do research? Yeah, of course so. It's about, of course you can. It's about how you manage your time in the work you've got. Different jobs. There's some jobs that are incredibly demanding, and some that have, that if you're organized, you can make enough space in life to do work. So, can you get your TTOs out of the way early? Can you organize your ward work to be finished so you've got a bit of time through the day to do stuff? That's different for different jobs, but there are many jobs that you can make space in with organization and determination and passion. Chetan, how would you follow that?
Yeah, and actually having more kind of clinical placements gives you more opportunities to engage with your supervisors during those different blocks. That opens doors. You know, I feel most of my work streams have come from just interacting with my bosses and saying, why don't you look into this or why don't you look into that? And you know, so I think having that kind of clinical exposure helps to accelerate some of those ideas.
And I think, so I'm a F1, and I think from my experience, there's definitely is time if you make the time for it. I think I was quite fortunate to have a psych rotation, which gave me that time to do a lot of other things. But there definitely is time for research. But as Chetan said about playing the game, it's, you know, are you applying for core training? You know, have you ticked the other boxes that can be ticked? And, you know, maybe focusing on that first. It just depends, and it's different for every other person. But yeah, there definitely is time for research as a non-academic foundation doctor.
Yeah, I really still believe you can be. I mean, my experience of clinical academic trainees is actually really can be clinically excellent and research excellent. I think one of the things that people worry is that you can't be both, but I don't think that's true. I think actually many of the clinical academics I know, many of the clinical academics I know, and I won't embarrass Chetan too much, but he's a great example of someone who are able to thrive at both. Because it's about organization and time management and determination and commitment. And if you're focused and organized and, you know, goal oriented, you can deliver on both. And people do. And so you really can be excellent in both. And we genuinely sit in, you know, I've been on ARCP panels today. I've been doing ARCP panels for 8 years. And actually many of the academic days, you just see people thriving at every domain. So it is totally achievable, but it's about, you know, being organized and goal focused, knowing where you want to be and setting yourself on that route.
There are two similar themed questions. I hope you don't mind if I just combine these, which are people working on non-orthopedic papers that are then considered, are these considered when you're applying to orthopedics? I think that's probably on two levels. One is to the AFP application, where it almost certainly doesn't matter, because I think at that stage you're kind of just looking for evidence of publications. Andy, you may be able to give a bit more insight into the ACF stage, but I remember when I applied, I think I only had a handful, maybe 1 or 2 publications in orthopedics, and most of my publications apply, well, I want to be an upper GI surgeon.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think outputs and quality matters more than exactly where they're in. I think where they're in is nice, and it's nice to have some work in the field you're interested in. Probably what is more important is broader evidence of interest in specialty. So, you know, if you have a few orthopedic papers, well, that's great. That definitely points towards commitment and interest to specialty. But equally, you know, having clinical training that's more recently in the clinical specialty, or other evidence of you know, engagement in that specialty. And you know, at this, I think we're all appreciative of the fact that at this stage in your careers, you move and change and have other ideas. And, you know, in my first couple of years, I found vascular surgery really good fun. And then I came back to orthopedics and said, oh yeah, no, I really like orthopedics. You know, there's lots of us, we all go through these cycles of, what do I want to do? What's the thing I want to do? And that's normal and healthy. And I don't think we recognize that that's okay. So I've definitely appointed a number of people into ACF posts where the majority of their research has been in other fields. So I think quality matters more than it being topical. But certainly it being topical does help you demonstrate your commitment to that thing. So a bonus, but not the key point. It's a bit of a roundabout answer, but.
Next question, would you recommend doing a PG cert in health research as part of an academic career?
Again, I think the two of us should answer that, because we've got probably have different perspectives, because Chetan's done it more recently than I have. I certainly recommend it to people, because I think it's worth learning, doing that formal learning, and it certainly gives you access to the formal learning. Now, as our ACF program, we actually offer a master's within the program. So it's funded a master's at Warwick in health research, because it means people do multiple modules and train broadly in health research. So at what point you want to do that is up to you. But I do think it's useful to have that broad base of research training. They're a big slog and they take more time out, and your time is busy. So you've got to balance that. And I think there's a little bit of being goal oriented in the first bit, and you're probably better to focus on doing research early. If you're having to choose between those two, then you are learning about it. But both are good. Chetan, what do you think? Is that a reasonable summary? Maybe that's
I think so. And just to put my kind of personal spin on it, there's plenty of ACS in our program who have done a master's. Like you said, it covers quite a broad range of skills. And doing my PhD now, I've done some of those master's modules and they've been very helpful. But I made a personal decision not to do the master's, because I find that I learn skills better by doing things. And so rather than going on a week-long course about how to do systematic review, I find it much more helpful to do a systematic review, and that consolidates the skills, and that's my learning style much better than going to attend lectures for a week. And each thing you do has an opportunity cost. So signing up to a PG set means you'll be spending weekends completing the PG set, and the opportunity that you lose there is an opportunity to do a systematic review or to do a paper. I had lots of projects that I was interested in, so I did those rather than going to lectures, because I found the latter very dry and I don't think I would have finished those. That said, you also have to look towards your application and the points you receive. And it goes back to the point I made before of playing the game. At various stages, you have shortlisting criteria. I knew that I have a BSc as an integrated degree because my university offered it. And as a result, I could only increase my potential marks by getting a PhD. So getting a PG cert wouldn't have added to my kind of points. But however, if that's not the case for you, then it might be something to consider.
Yeah, you'll certainly learn a lot, but it's managing, it's the juggling, the difficult balance of juggling at that phase of your career. So it's a sort of quite an individual thing. Is the FHEA recognised as part of academic pathway applications? Do you know what? That's an interesting question that I couldn't honestly tell you the answer for. I'd probably have to go and look it up myself. I suppose what it probably would be recognised is to get. So I presume this is a fellowship of the Higher Education Authority, or the sort of effectively, to get that you need a teaching qualification. So this is teaching qualification, I presume. I hope I've interpreted that question right. If so, yeah, that would definitely be recognised. You've got, it's the equivalent of a PG cert in medical education to get that as a qualification. And if so, then yeah, I think that's that would definitely score on the application process. It would be sort of considered a equivalent to a PG cert. So yeah, I hope I've interpreted that question right. Yeah, great. So I'm conscious we're probably running over time slightly. Do we keep going, or should we, what do we think? Happy to chat for a bit longer if needs be, but.
Are there any other questions?
I think we can, if there's, yeah.
Doesn't seem like there is. Hannah, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you to all the speakers and everyone who's participated today. I will send you a survey link, and please do fill out the feedback. We do take it on board and read it. And yeah, we'll be in touch via email. And everyone have a good evening. And if you could all log out of Zoom. Thank you.
Just to quickly add to that, yeah, thank you everyone for attending the series. I think the stats lecture that we were supposed to have will be put online. And if in the comments that we do have for this survey, if you could mention anything that you'd have liked to see later on in the series, if we do start again next year, is there anything you'd like to see, and any suggestions? But yeah, thank you so much to Professor Metcalfe and Mr. Khatri.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Great. Thank you very much.